at it. I'll try to, do something like that. And if there are questions, definitely please send. So when you go to flutter.dev and go to get started, you arrive at this page. You can download the Flutter SDK for various platforms. I'm on a Windows machine now, so I'm over here. It's basically a zip file. You download that and you extract it somewhere in your hard drive. So, and just that extracted zip file is your Flutter SDK. Nothing, no installations to your system, nothing else. And as you can see, I have multiple Flutter versions lying around here. 2.8.1 is the current version, but you can have multiple ones. You can point your project to whichever one, and then it just works. So it's over here. Under bin, there is a flutterbot, dartbot, or flutterdart, the shell scripts through which you access Flutter. So for example, if you open a command prompt, you just type Flutter, and then you're running that command line program. Of course, using an IDE would be much better than doing things in command line. That's why we have Android Studio, we have IntelliJ. Both of them are the same, from the same company, same thing. They have Flutter plugins. So over here you can see under plugins, Dart and Flutter. If you install Flutter, it installs Dart automatically. So if you're in the IntelliJ Android Studio world, this is it. There's also Visual Studio Code you can use, which also has Flutter Dart plugins. But I'm more comfortable here, so I'll be using Android Studio actually, which is easiest to get started. So like I said, Flutter is a cross-platform development framework. So you have to have the Android or iOS or whatever desktop, you have to have some requirements. So for example, today I'll just be doing Android because this is a Windows PC. So I need to have Android setup complete. Okay, so I need to be able to create Android applications on my computer. That's a prerequisite. Over that, I can start to create Flutter applications. So before doing anything else, you need to get your Android setup right. Or if you're on Mac, there's in the Mac page, there's iOS setup. You have to get that right. So you install Android Studio, which is normally used for Android development, but you can also use it for Flutter. But you install Android Studio and then set up an Android device as an emulator, or you connect your phone with a cable, USB issues, etc. You have to overcome all of that first. Okay. And if you have issues, you can contact me. If you want to contact me, you can reach me through Twitter, DMs, or you can send a Stack Overflow message. I'm also active on Stack Overflow. I have 6.8K, so 8.6K points. So you can, if you ask a question, tag me in Twitter or something. But anybody else can answer that also, of course. I would be happy to help you during that setup. But once it's set up, you need to have this Android emulator. If you have it, if you want to work with an emulator, you can have it. Or you can, if maybe your computer is slow, you can use an Android device with a cable. That may be even better to do. But over here, I have AVD Manager. This is the one that's running this Android emulator, is this one. You can have multiple ones, tablet emulators, etc. But there are all kinds of technical issues that you can have here, and you should get somebody to help you, ideally, with those. But once you're done with all of that, you have the Android SDK lying somewhere in your hard drive, and then you downloaded and extracted the Flutter SDK also. What you do is you open up a command line and say, well, you add it to your path. It tells you how to do that around here, update your path. But if you don't want to even add it to your path, you can always, especially when you have multiple Flutter versions, you can just do this also, directly run it with the full path. That's also fine. The reason that you're adding it to your system path is so that when you type Flutter, you are able to run it. So for example, I can do version here. This is Flutter 2.8.1. I can go to one of the other folders that I have here, for example, 2.2.3, because of old projects we have lying around. I need to keep them around. So this one is 2.3. 2.3, for example. So it's okay to have multiple Flutter installations. It's good to get accustomed with these, so things will work better for you. But if I just type Flutter, it's in my path. So you'll see 2.8.1. And what you do is you run Flutter Doctor after you have the Android working, and then you have the Flutter extracted. You run Flutter Doctor. If there is something to be done, it shows you here. It tries to do it automatically. If not, it gives you links. So follow what it tells you. But as you can see, I have Android Studio installed. I have Flutter installed, Android IntelliJ, Android Toolchain installed, right? Android SDK. So I'm good to go, actually. So what I do is I can open up Android Studio and then say File, New. When you try to do that, you won't see Flutter project initially, okay? So you go to Settings and you install the Flutter plugin. Over here, you just type Flutter in plugins. It is installed in my computer, but you install it. It requires a restart of Android Studio. But once you have it, then you can say File, New, Flutter project. And let's actually do it. Here, it asks you which Flutter SDK are we using. So where did I extract my Flutter zip is what it's asking. And this one was the one, as you remember earlier. This is where my Flutter installation actually is. Yes. Wherever you want, you can do it. But yeah, a word of advice, because you are also a non-English country. I'm also in Turkey. So we have a lot of issues with non-English characters. So we have some special characters in Turkish. If you have it in your path of your Flutter installation, if you have it in the path of your project folder, you run into all kinds of surprise issues. Some of them are specific to your language sometimes, and you Google that, you can't find, and only Turkish people are complaining about that. Then you realize, okay, it's a Turkish character. Or spaces are similar. So no spaces in your development paths, no special characters in your development paths, just to be sure. So this is why I install it to somewhere like that. And then now I need to write the name of my project. Let's say something like this. And as you can see, it goes to here. No spaces, no Turkish characters, no special characters. It's where it's going. And this organization is your ID of your application. So this will be also important sometimes. And where you actually see it is when you submit it to Play Store. You're done with your application and you submit it to App Store. Then you see over here that ID. Okay, this is one place that people will see it. So writing something stupid may not be a good idea. In iOS, people don't see it, but still it's being used in the system. So you type something. Usually, if you own example.com, you reverse it, and then that's something you add to it. So I own gbot dev, so I'll say dev.gbot. Something. It needs to be unique compared to other apps. Android, iOS, web support, Linux, macOS, Windows support, you can add them if things are installed in your system, if you enable desktop, etc. But by default, I'll have 3 platforms. I say finish, and now it's creating the Flutter project for me. Now I'll actually say this window. So as you know, we got to know the Flutter SDK. Now let's take a look at the Flutter project. If you do a open in Explorer here, you see the folder that it is in, Flutter JP Online, I called it. And what you see here is reflected here. So you should make sure that this says project. If this says something like something else, then you see other things. So you should just make it project if it's something else. And you open the root folder of your project. Over here, it should be open. So when we look at it, we see an iOS and Android folder. We see a web folder. So Android folder has a full-fledged Android project. iOS folder has a full-fledged Xcode iOS project. Web has HTML stuff in it. So iOS and Android, you can actually open this in Xcode. you can actually open this in Android Studio. So it's actually a small native project that will host Flutter in it. Okay, so there's an Android project. When you deploy it to Android, this folder is used, and in it, your Flutter, your Dart codes execute. Okay, so this is the host native app. It's a small app. It's just a shell. In it, your Flutter project works. Similarly for iOS. So Flutter also uses these projects to do native stuff. So if something is not supported in Flutter, Bluetooth, whatever location, something new comes up, right? 3D touch phones are able to do something new, and maybe it's not in Flutter yet. You use it through these native apps, little native apps, and over here you'll see Java Kotlin codes. You can actually, you have a main activity, you can write actual Java code in here. But anyway, so let's look at our Flutter parts of our project. Lib folder main.dart is our main source code. But there's only one other thing, pubspec YAML. This is the configuration file of our project. So pubspec YAML and whatever is in lib folder are our main files. The rest is supporting things. Analysis options is for the linter configuration. You can even delete it, that would still work. But pubspec YAML is your project name, etc., your environment Dart version you're using. And here comes the libraries that you use. And those libraries are in pub.dev. This is like NPM for Dart. All kinds of, for example, Firebase. You can search, all kinds of libraries are here. And you add them to your under your dependencies, or you can use this command line to add them into your project or under dependencies here. Okay, so this is where you get your libraries. They appear under external libraries over here. Right now, there's nothing. So I need to run pubget once. I can click it. As you can see, it's actually using 2.8.1 Flutter, and which is, if you are confused, if you're not sure, we gave it when we were creating the project, as you remember. You can always go to settings, its preferences in Mac. You can select languages and frameworks, Flutter, and then this project's for current project, the selected Flutter installation. You can always get there and you can change it if you want, etc. But yes, I guess there isn't much. Yeah, Dart packages has, so for example, Cupertino icons, it says, you can see it here. It is downloaded from pub.dev. And used as a library in my Flutter project. Okay, so I guess enough talk about the Flutter project. You run pubget to download the libraries. So how do you run this thing? You can type Flutter run, but I highly suggest that you should use an IDE like Android Studio. And here we already have a run configuration created for us for Flutter. So I'll just run it. And you can run it with play, or you can run it with debug mode. I highly suggest you use debug mode. It's the same thing. In debug mode, only extra is it stops on breakpoints. So if you want to line by line run your code, that's very useful. You can do that. And right now it's compiling the Android application, this shell Android application. Once it does, it will install it. It will run my Dart code inside it. During development, it works like kind of like a scripting thing. There's a VM in here that runs my Dart code. When you deploy, it is actually compiled to ARM binary. So during development, it runs a little slower, but it lets you do a lot of things. During production, it runs much faster. So in the meantime, these comments. So it's trying to, okay, it's compiled the APK, it installed the APK on this phone. And then our sample application is now running. Let me do reformat code to, yes, okay, fixed formatting. I want to get rid of the comments so we can actually look at more code. Okay, so this application is running now. You can look at the, let me find that window. You can look at the documentation. to learn about a lot of things, and I'll try to show you some things. But under Get Started, there's Write Your First App. If you're coming from another platform, iOS Dev, Android Dev, there is some documentation just for you to get you started quickly. There are sample tutorials, and there's all kinds of user interface, data, etc. documentation here. And there are some code labs also. I believe you can probably look around to find them. Yes, over here, code labs also run you step by step and get you to certain things. So feel free to use the documentation as much as you can. There's also, if you just Google, for example, text fields, let's say, you land at the API docs. So this is the regular documentation. This is the API docs. So that's also talking about different classes, widgets, etc. Make sure you use them. But application. So this is the Dart language. So let me try to give you some pointers about the Dart language. It looks very much like Java in some ways, but in every Dart application, there's a void main function that's like C, C++. This is where everything starts. So no magical things, etc. And you can even set a breakpoint there and then say hot restart to restart everything, like stop start. And breakpoint hit here, you know, line by line, you can go in. This is Flutter SDK's code. You can, you know, line by line run everything. And if I want, I can put, for example, when I press the button, this function should execute. I press the button, you know, stopped here, and I can look at this. The counter is 0 right now, and then yes, I'll continue. Now it became 1. I can press one more time. Now I see counter as 1. Now it became 2. So debugging works perfectly. That's something that you have to use. Before diving into Dart language, let me talk about other things. So I just showed you line by line debugging. If you debug your code in Java, etc., it works the way you expect in here. So one of the most powerful things, I told you that writing Flutter is a delight. Once as a programmer, you learn how to write Flutter, you go to your company, you say, let's do our next project in Flutter. And let me show you 2 reasons why. The first one is hot reload. The second one is Flutter Inspector. So the first one, for example, it says you have pushed this button this many times. And I found that text here, and I changed it. Okay, and look at the application. Now I'll just hit save, and immediately you see it change. And the number didn't change, but the running application changed. So I'm able to mold the running application as I develop. So there is no waiting for a couple of minutes for it to compile, start it from scratch, etc. So here is a column, for example. I can add new text to that column. And immediately when I save it, it appears and my state is saved. So it doesn't break the app. I don't have to start the app from scratch. So this is something very important because as the app is running, you get to shape it. So for example, you say, okay, here will be a button and there will be a, I don't know, what, for example, image. This is something that I like to do. So there will be a button, there will be an image. Okay, let's make this a button now. And the IDE also helps you write some of this code a lot. So and then let me add a onPressed function. Okay, and when I save it, now it's a button. And then let me, instead of the image, let me put something. So step by step, I just put a bunch of texts around and then convert them to what they need to be. Like a person who is molding a sculpture using clay, I get to, you know, shape my application as it is running. This is very powerful. This is called hot reload, stateful hot reload. One of the powerful things about Flutter. Another thing is Flutter Inspector. So this is also very powerful. The first time it runs, it apparently makes you wait a little bit. If this doesn't run, you may be using an old version of Flutter. The Flutter plugin and the Flutter version may not be compatible, but it ran. So what's happening here is I will talk about the widgets and everything, but the user interface elements, that are active at the moment in the app, in the running app, are reflected here. So this is like an X-ray of the running application. Okay, so it says 6, for example, for text. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the current contents of the screen, all the user interface elements are laid out in a nice tree. So this is one thing. Something even better, there is a toggle select widget mode button here. When you enable it, you get to press somewhere on the app, and it gets you to the code that created that. So for example, I can press this plus button, and icon add. So this is where that is in the code. This is also very powerful. For example, I can change that icon to something else. Icon favorite, for example. When I save it, it immediately became a heart, as you can see, hopefully. I can, if you want to select something else, you can click this again, and then go. For example, I found the button. Or you saw this icon here, you can click on that. Now you're again in select widget mode. I can click on something else. As you can see, this is the text Flutter demo homepage where that appeared. And then I can add a string to it, maybe something more meaningful, like that. And as you can see, it appeared there. So this is also very powerful. Why? Because I have the running application. Right now it's very simple, but I may have a very complicated application with multiple pages. So I go to page 5, and then I see, okay, where is the code, right? Especially when you sit down to edit somebody else's code. But you don't have to wonder at all. You just go to there in the app, just press this, and you are in front of the code. Now you continue where you left off, okay? Where you just continue developing that. So for example, I can change the style of this text. Right. Increase the font size, for example. Immediately, I'm able to do that. I don't have to wander around in code, try to find it. The underlines are, it wants me to add the const modifier. Let's do that. But if you don't want that, for example, if you're a total beginner, you don't want to deal with any of that, you can delete the analysis options YAML file, and you won't see those anymore. As a beginner, if you don't want to be bugged about some of those suggestions, you can do that. So, okay, the Flutter Inspector still has some other very powerful things. You see the tree, you can go from user interface, press on the user interface to go to code, as well as it is also selected in this tree. So let me show it to you again. As you can see, the app bar text got selected. As you can see, floating action button icon got selected, both in code, in the tree, and in the app here. And you see all kinds of rectangles around things that tell you about how they are located, how layout is happening. And there's a layout explorer here that tells you why things are sized a certain way, the widths and heights of them, etc. Their parent relationship with their parent, and a detailed tree about the internal widgets that make up that widget. Width and height you can see here. So these are very powerful. So if you leave with something today, if you ever will start Flutter development, make sure you do hot reload, make sure you do debugging line by line, make sure you use Flutter Inspector to its fullest. Okay, make sure you use that very often. Otherwise, it's not going to be as pleasant of an experience. These are unique things to Flutter that make it very delightful to work with without a lot of hassles. Okay, so let me talk about the Dart language a little bit again. We start out with a main function. As you can see, this is like Java-like language. And if you know Java, if you know a language like that, C# or something like that, you'll feel very much at home in a lot of things. You already know a lot of the language, actually, you'll find. So here we have a run app function that is called in the Flutter framework. Everything is open source, by the way. You can do control click, or command click in Mac to go to every line of source code. Nothing is closed in the Dart side of things. Of course, the native side is a different story, but every pixel on this screen is rendered by Dart code. So you can go to Dart code and see everything. But if there are native parts like using Bluetooth, whatever, there will be a native limit that you'll go until when you do these control clicks. Okay, so That's a function of Flutter framework, and that's where Flutter starts. Till then, it's a Dart application. Dart can create command line applications and things like that. But Run app starts out with Flutter. And there's a const myapp here. So I can delete this const and it still works. I can do hot restart and you'll see it still works. This is my breakpoint. So this is a class name, this myapp. As you can see, class myapp. Okay, so there's a hidden new keyword here. If you know Java or C#, whatever, all those languages have new keywords, and it also works with the new keyword. This new keyword is optional. Okay, in all Dart versions, it wasn't optional, so we have to write new. But when you have a class name, when you're calling the class, it's kind of obvious that it's you're creating a new instance of that class. So the new keyword you don't have to use in Dart. Whenever you see a class name, parentheses, it means that there's a hidden new keyword here, and you are creating an instance of this class, okay? So some object-oriented knowledge is expected here. Class is a blueprint for an object. When you create an instance of that class, you actually have an object in memory. You can have multiple objects that don't relate to each other from the same class. Okay, so we are creating this myapp class. What was that const? It says my internet connection is stable. I hope you can follow me. Okay, no, it doesn't say anymore. There was a const here. You don't have to worry about it so much right now. You can delete all the consts and your application still works the same way. But let me tell you in a couple of sentences. When you have a const constructor, it means that you can get away with only one instance throughout the app of this object. The parameters that are being passed aren't changing. This is a very obvious kind of class, and every time you create an instance, you don't have to have a new instance. They are all the same objects. Therefore, Dart compiler just creates one of them, and you are none the wiser. So all the strings are like this, all the numbers are like this. And if you can const things, it runs a little more efficiently. But like I said, you can delete all the consts, and I'll actually do that. And the application still works exactly the same way. Okay, so not to confuse you for now, because it may be a little bit of a confusion at the moment. And as you change a lot of things, like I have, hot reload doesn't work perfectly, so you hot restart to restart the application, because changing all the consts was a big change in the application. Okay, now we don't have those consts. When you use the class name, there's a hidden new here, and then keys, etc. I'm not going to talk about it. You can also delete them. It will work pretty much the same way. But I have a class here that extends stateless widgets. So from your other object-oriented languages, you know class hierarchy. This is the parent class. This is the child class. Stateless widget is a class. And whatever that stateless widget class has, my app also has that and more. Okay. So my app class is extending the stateless widget class. Stateless widget class has some things, and my app will have more things in addition to whatever stateless widget has. That's what extends is, if you know object-oriented programming. So we're extending from that class. So this stateless widget is the things that we have on the screen. User interface elements are widgets. This is a stateless widget. We will also have a stateful widget. We will look at the difference a little later. But know that this class represents a user interface area. For example, this my app actually takes up the whole space, but I guess you can scaffold is what you can select. My homepage, material app, my app. So it is in the widget hierarchy. This is the beginning of my application. It's also a widget. Inner things are also widgets. So your application has to start with a widget. That widget is placed on the screen, takes up the whole space. And then all these widgets have a build function. So if you did any React Native, there's a render function there. In Flutter, there's a build function. And the build function is where you create your user interface. The user interface is a hierarchy of widget objects. Okay. So here, like I told you, so it's supposed to return you a widget object instance. Build function returns that, a widget object instance. The stateless widget extends the widget class. So everything is extending widget class, all the user interface elements. So we are returning a user interface element from the build function. Whenever it needs to display something, all its children are created in the build function. In React and React Native, there's a JSX different language here for that. In here, it's all Dart code. So we are creating a material app. This is, again, a widget, a special widget for doing a lot of material design things. Material app has Flutter demo title. It appears over here sometimes when you're in some Androids, when you're switching apps, you see that. Some information about its theme. So for example, blue is the main color here. I could have it red, and it can change immediately like that, as you know. And then home is the my home page, another widget. And here we have a stateful widget. And under it, we have a build function also, but the stateful widget has the widget class and a state class, okay? So stateless widget user interface elements are only one class with a build function. Stateful widget user interface elements have a widget class without a build function and some boilerplate code to create the state class, state object, and a state class with a similar name that holds the changing values, okay? So these widgets, stateless or stateful, these are created again and again. This build function, as you can see, there are new keywords here, hidden new keywords behind, in front of every class here, okay? So every time the build function is called, a bunch of objects are created and put into a hierarchy. So with every screen refresh, all these widgets are being created again. Old ones are thrown away, new ones are created. Stateless is like that, stateful is like that, but stateful widgets also have a friend state object. This is not recreated. This is created only the first time this stateful widget appears. So I keep my changing long-term memory in these state objects, okay? If I try to keep something in here, as you can see, these are all final variables if you have variables inside widgets, because if I change something here, it will be lost in the next refresh. But over here, we have the state object, which remembers things as they change, which is why we have the counter variable in the state object. As I press this, that counter variable increases with this increment counter function. So things that you remember are in state object of a stateful widget. And the build function is in the state object, not in the stateful widget. In stateless widget, it was in the widget class because there's only one. But in stateful widgets, the build function is in state objects. And in it, again, you are supposed to return a widget instance. And scaffold is a special widget that's for your page. Pretty much the whole page is held in the scaffold widget. But you could have some other scheme, it's okay. This is the material design scheme. It has an app bar on top. If I can, I can comment it out and you'll see it disappear. Now it appeared again. And in the body, here you can have whatever widget hierarchy you want to create. Center, column, let's take a look at them. So for example, if I select the center widget takes up the whole space, center is what it contains. Column takes up this vertical space and puts things on top of each other as a column. And in it, there are multiple children, as you can see. There's a text. Press this minute, there's a text. It was 0, now it's 6. I can refresh to see 6 here. There's a button, which has a text as a child. There's a text that says image. And there is the app bar, which is on top, and there's floating action button. So this scaffold body is our playground as far as the widgets go. So you have to learn these widgets to become productive in Flutter. What does center do? What does column do, etc. And those are, you can look at the documentation. There's nice documentation here about, layouts, creating layouts with Flutter. The samples, etc. also talk about that. But the user interface, introduction to widgets, building layouts. So you can spend some time here to understand the rows and columns you put things into, etc. Everything is a widget. There's a widget tree that you're creating through these build functions. So you have to spend some time to become more comfortable with the widgets. But once you are in a good position, there is there's another how this layout algorithm works kind of. Yes, constraints go down. You can find it like that. Yeah, so understanding constraints. It was probably there somewhere, I couldn't see. So this is the holy grail. This teaches you how this layout algorithm works in a really nice way. I highly suggest you looking at that once you are a little comfortable with the layouts of Flutter widgets. But you have to learn about it to become productive. But you can see quickly here, you can select different widgets, you can see what they are. Most widgets have a child parameter that has the whatever it contains widget. Column, row, stack have children parameter, which has a list of widgets. So this thing here is like an array list from Java. You can just type. So for example, in this function, I can do. You can just type this. Just like JavaScript, I created the array of integers or list of numbers. This is like array list from Java, and I can do, and I'll be using some IDE shortcuts underneath over here in green. You see what I'm pressing for Windows and Mac. I can create a variable, for example. This is a list of integers, like an array list from Java. Okay, it deduced the ID, the type automatically. I could have also said final to prevent its reassignment. Not reassign it, it's a final object, etc. So this one is a list of widgets. If you type the, give the type in front of the list like this, you can also type give the type of the list. Even if it's empty, even if it cannot deduce. But it can deduce here. I could delete this, it would be fine. So this column has a list of widgets that are its children, and the column lays them out vertically. If this was a row, it would lay them out horizontally. Okay? The axis is horizontal versus vertical. These are different widgets, row and column. The main axis alignment center, you can change this. This is an enum parameter. Oh, before going to that, these, for example, this column is a constructor, right? Because I said there's a new keyword. The capitalized things are all class names usually. So this column is a class, and it has a constructor. And look at the constructor definition. There are curly braces inside the parentheses. This makes all the parameters named parameters, okay? For example, in Java, you have like 10 parameters. You have to give first one, second one, third one. You have to remember which one, fifth one was. But here, if you have many parameters like this, if you do curly brace, then your parameters become named parameters. So for example, that main axis alignment parameter can be given using its name here. You give main axis alignment name, column, and then the actual parameter. Children, column, and then the actual parameter. Similarly, app bar, title, etc. So all of these keyword columns are named parameters, which I've been mentioning, but not telling you what they are. For example, text, the first parameter is a nameless parameter. So if you look at it, so string, this data is a nameless parameter, but all the rest are in the curly brace, they are named parameters, okay? So, for example, if I want to give style, I have to say style. Like I did earlier. Early also, but fix indentation a little bit, okay. Okay, so the text became larger on top in the app bar. So these are named parameters of this column constructor. One other thing here, we don't have it here, but over in text constructor, you had this.style over here in these constructors. So what is this? So for example, you have the string data, key, this data, but yeah, key, for example. But this.style, what is this? There's a style field, style variable inside this class. So this parameter has the same name, and whatever you pass here, it is assigned to this variable. So this is a shortcut like that. Otherwise, in Java, for example, what would you type? You would type text style as the parameter, and around here you would assign and that's to this.style. So this is another shorthand from Dart that makes it a little easier to assign things to class variables. Yeah, so we have these parameters that are being passed to this column widget, and main example, children, etc. define how it behaves. Yes. So another thing. So for example, this floating action button is here. I also created an elevated button. If you ever did JavaScript, you should be familiar with this. This is a function definition, nameless function definition. I can just write open parentheses, close parentheses, and then write a function body and a bunch of lines. This creates a nameless function to be called later. So I create this function here with this context, and then I pass it to onPressed, which is a void callback, which is a function type. It's like a function pointer, function reference. So I'm passing a function for the elevated button to call later. Okay. So when I press this elevated button, I actually press it, this pressed is printed out in my console as a result. Something similar happens here. This floating action button, this round button here, also has an onPressed. Instead of a nameless function, we give it a named function. So increment counter, this is more like a function that you're used to, a method of this class. And then this is called. But I could have just gotten this over there and have a nameless function if it's not used anywhere else. I can even do something like this inline. It actually refers to the class, so I couldn't do that. But if this wasn't here, I guess I could do it. Remove the methods. Okay, I couldn't, but normally it works sometimes. Who knows why it didn't work? I could have brought it over there. So like this, let me do it manually. This is exactly the same idea. I'm creating a function because I don't use it anywhere else. I can just directly pass it to the widget and still increment the number. Okay. For example, icon is also a constructor call, but this is not this is a widget, sorry. Sometimes some things aren't widgets, but this is also a widget. The parameter this.icon is icon data. This is not a widget. This is just a class that holds information about icons. And this icons.favorite is probably a static, yes, it's a static member of the icon class. Icon data instance, a single instance exists in the app. So for every icon like that. Yeah, so I hope this is giving you an idea. Let me quickly create another page. So let's see, how do we go to another page, for example. This is a mobile app. Yes, you have these user interface elements, but there's navigation also in mobile apps. It's quite easy in Flutter. There is the old navigation system with navigator push, which I will use now, but there is a new navigation system, and there are a lot of packages that use it, Go Router, etc. You can learn about it, but the simple way, let's say when we press this button that I have in the center, is through this navigator of context .push. What am I doing here? Let me briefly talk about them. So this context parameter is being passed to my build function. And this context parameter contains information about my widget tree. So I am here with this context parameter. I am able to reach up the tree. So it's basically mainly used for that purpose. Okay. So for example, theme of context reaches up the tree and finds the theme object. Navigator of context reaches up the tree inside material app actually. So I can actually find it. If I select material app, if I look at its details tree, somewhere around here, there's a navigator. You will see these are the detail inner widgets of that widget. I may or may not be able to find it quickly, so I don't want to spend a lot of time. But you see media query, for example, you can reach that to find size information, directionality. So these are all in the material app. Showing you, things about. There's a navigator. Oh, I actually found it. Nice. Yeah, navigator. Okay. So I'm reaching up the tree to get to that navigator with this code. And I'm pushing something to that navigator. Navigation works with push and pop. So there are multiple pages. You push a page, you push another page, and you pop them to see the pages behind. Okay. So we need to push a route. Material page route. Oops, page route is the simple one to use. And it has a builder function. We use builder functions a lot in Flutter. This is a function that is supposed to return a widget. Okay, gets a context, supposed to return a widget. So let me create a new page, a very simple page, return. Okay, very simple. My new page is only a text widget that says the new page. So let me try to go there. As you can see, this is my new page, but it looks very bad because it doesn't have a scaffold. It doesn't have these material design things. And they intentionally made it bad like that. So you're not satisfied with it. You shouldn't be satisfied with it. So let me actually put some things around it. Put a parent widget and make it scaffold. The child is a body. And when I run it, sorry, I have to go back and then come back here. Yeah, so now it looks a little better, but it's underneath that bar there. You can use, if you want, the safe area. If I do it like this, my indentation will look better. As you can see, I'm not typing all the code. I'm getting the IDE to type a lot for me. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare. Okay, safe area prevented it from going under that bar. I can have an app bar also. Sorry, in the scaffold. Title. Sorry, this needs to be a widget, so it's a text. Text is a widget, text widget. Okay, I saved it. I pressed the button, the second page, the new page. I can now, like I said, shape it like a sculptor. I'm centering it, saving it. Now it should be, sorry, save area center. Why didn't it center? I must have an error somewhere. Sometimes this happens. I'll just do, oh yeah, I have to come back to this page because I created this inline. Yes, so now it's in the center. So this is, of course, not a good approach, writing everything inside one function. So I need to get this out to another class. So let me copy this code. Like this, yeah, let me cut that code. Now I will create a new class. Let me just act as if it's there. Return my new page. Okay. Okay. How do I create my new page? I can create a new file, or I can do it here for quickness. I will say stateless or stateful. For example, stateful, it automatically creates the boilerplate for me. And I'll say my new page. And then here I'll return that I had earlier. Okay. And now it still works. Now I'll be able to sculpt it, like I said, for example, align instead of center, and then alignment top center, for example. Now, I copy pasted the code. I could have also said, for example, this part, I want to create a new sub widget class, refactor, extract Flutter widget, my center content, for example. It extracted the Flutter widget class for me. The class is over here. It's a stateless widget, and it's right like this. And I can convert it to stateful widget also. It does all the changes for me. So all of these are very powerful IDE features. I think you should, things that I showed, you should use them. You should look for more if you want. But And since I made it a stateful widget, I can create a button here, change things, remember those, etc., make some user interaction happen. Yeah, let's actually create a button that goes to the previous page, and let's be done with it because we're almost out of time. Let me create a column here, and then let me create something like this, go back, and then let me make the button, elevate button, and let's create the onPressed. So as you remember, I used navigator of context push to push a new page. Now I'll do pop to get back. I was going back with the back button. Navigator of context. That's all I need to do. I can pass a parameter, I can pass a value back, I can wait for that value where I pushed, etc. Those are all possible. But when I press go back, I go back. Okay. You can have all kinds of animations, etc. with the screen transitions. But I hope this gave you some feel of Flutter development, some feel of the Dart language, and I hope some feel of the IDE and the tools that we have. I'd like to stress the importance of hot reload. So as I change this, as you can see, immediately it changes there, which is very powerful. I can use Flutter Inspector to find out where is which code, right? That's also very powerful. You don't have to remember anything. You don't have to browse through code. You just go there in the application, press on the icon to go there. Of course, there's a lot more to discover about Flutter. Let me tell you, once you are more comfortable creating user interface, what you're going to start wondering about is this data backend state management. There are multiple approaches to it, and you should, keep an eye on it as you, improve yourself in Flutter. Something you have to remember, another thing that needs to be said is build functions aren't supposed to change any state. They aren't supposed to make any network requests, etc. Build functions, get these values, convert them to user interface. And you do those changes, etc. in other functions like this or in some other places. That's what I want to leave you with. But these are things that I would show somebody who is new to Flutter. Of course, to learn it, to use it, you have to spend a lot of time yourself. But I hope you remember, hey, that guy showed me how to do this thing, and that might save you some time in your Flutter adventure.